All right, thanks for coming, everybody. Welcome to Networking Hour. Today we're going to be talking about pricing strategies. All right, so what do you guys think? Why does price matter?
Because money matters.
Okay, that's a good reason.
Because cost is effective. I mean, you have to, there's cost.
Okay, so there's got to be some balance between what you sell things for and
How else are you going to make money?
If you don't have a proper price, people won't buy it. They'll think it's overpriced or underpriced.
That's true.
Actually, no one.
Overpriced.
Yeah, price can signal some things about quality, and also if it's too high price, people just don't buy it. All right. So here's some stats. 72% of new products never meet their revenue targets. A quarter of all businesses confess that not one of their new offerings met their profitability goals. Does this surprise anybody?
No.
Why is that?
Considering most markets are competitive markets, and some companies already have it cornered.
Yeah, that's true. All right, here's another thing to think about. The impact of price on profit, and you guys talked about this a little bit, the importance of pricing effectively relative to your costs. This gets me every time. For a company with an 8% profit margin, a 1% increase in sales price yields an 11% increase in profit. What do you guys think about that?
It's magic.
Anybody explain why that's true?
Is part of the reason because there are a lot of sunk costs that sort of get absorbed by. No, I don't know the answer.
Yeah. Well, it just comes down to math. If your costs stay the same, a small increase in price can lead to a significant increase in profits. Right? So you only got an 8% profit margin. The 1% price increase is over the whole price of the product. Right? So you raise that by 1%, and that goes all to profit margin, which yields an 11% increase in profit. All right, so here's another example. So we got something that's got a sales price of $1,000, and our costs are $750, so we've got a $250 profit margin. We're able to double that sales price to $2,000, profit expense 5 times to $1,250. Everybody see how that works? And so then the question you should be asking, could you attract one of your 5 current customers to pay double? Right? Because you would make the same profit, but you'd have to do way less work. And so this is often a mistake people make, is they underprice their products thinking they can just sell more product at a lower price, but you end up not taking home any more profit, and you end up working a lot. All right, so this is the table worked out for all the different profit margins. If you ever got a really slim profit margin, probably because you're in a competitive industry, say 5%, if you're able to increase your sales price by 1%, assuming constant costs and the same demand, your profit margin goes up 19%. Right? So any ability to price higher, particularly in a competitive market, is really important. And that's why innovation and differentiation are so important to profitability. And you can see these get really dramatic as you're able to raise your prices even more. Any other observations with this table? So you've got changes in sales price and your current profit margin, and then the profit margin growth based on those changes down there. All right, so this just really shows how important it is to be able to price higher if you can, because you don't end up taking home a lot more money. All right, anybody ever heard this? If you want more customers, just lower your prices, right? Okay, has anybody heard this stuff? This is common advice. A lot of times that people think this is the way you're going to grow your business. It's actually on the top 10 rookie mistakes for entrepreneurs. And that's keeping your prices reasonable. And I just think this is good, so I'll read the whole thing. How about picking a price that will allow you to make money? Many entrepreneurs underprice their products or services in an attempt to attract business. They either have no understanding what their costs are, or they're too busy to think about them. At some point, they have to hire an employee. That low price will leave no profit after the employee is paid. May even cause a loss. Starts a very bad chain reaction to cash flow problems, profit problems, and stress. Perhaps the biggest mistake is thinking these problems can be solved by attracting more business. So this is one of the reasons pricing is so important, is by pricing your products right, you can make sure that once you do grow and need to hire people, there's still profit left over after that. All right, so how do we price our products right? We'll talk about a couple things. We'll talk about competitive advantages, general pricing strategies, cost plus, value-based pricing, skimming, anchoring, feature-based pricing. We'll talk about distribution channels and pricing, and then some other considerations. All right, so when we talk about competitive advantages, there's two: cost leadership or product differentiation. We always recommend choosing one. Why do you think that is? Why wouldn't you try to do both?
You don't want to get stuck in the middle.
Exactly.
It's probably, go ahead, sorry.
You're trying to compete for selling yourself as a quality product, but you're not competing price-wise with quality products, and you're trying to compete on price level also at the same time.
Yeah, when you think about pricing on cost leadership, you basically need to strip away everything that's not essential. You're going to differentiate, you're going to be doing something different. So doing something different or more will cost more. So if you price with the price leaders that have really stripped down products, eventually they'll overrun you because they'll make more profit because your cost structure is higher. And so if you're, depending on which one you choose, you just need to go all in on those ones. If you're going to be a cost leader, you need to do things like Walmart does, like negotiate aggressively with suppliers to make sure their costs are super low. Have an incredible infrastructure of supply chain to be able to get product that would be very difficult to compete with. And you start doing those things and you get a really strong cost structure where you can be competitive as a cost leader. If you can't do those type of things, you really need to go with differentiation. And so that's generally what we recommend. As a startup, you're going to do something new, something novel. You should be trying to differentiate. And as a result, you should be charging more. One of the best examples of this is Apple. And so if we look at this chart here, average revenues per PC sold for manufacturers. All right, which one of these lines is Apple, you think? Top. So their average revenue per PC is around $1,300 to $1,200. Everybody else is fighting for $800 to $400. Now, how have they been able to maintain that high of a revenue price when everybody else is fighting over these lower margins?
Constant innovation.
Constant innovation.
Product differentiation.
That's it. Yeah, definitely. They've been able to differentiate on a lot of fronts. I mean, they've got their unique operating system. They've got the interface. They've been able to grow a lot of brand recognition.
I'd also say their stores. Their stores are a customer experience as well.
Yeah. So all this customer experience stuff, they've been able to build a brand that's just more compelling than these other producers, and they make you pay for it. And as a result, people actually do because they do have products that people really like that are different than these other ones. And so they've been able to maintain this much higher price point by being different than all these other manufacturers. What's interesting about that is it didn't lead them to be successful, successful as they are now initially because they had to build up that brand. But once they did, you can see they became the biggest company in the world in terms of valuation. So it took time, and they didn't do it by taking over a lot of market share. They did it by having a super high profit margin and gradually increasing that volume. All right, some more stats. 80% of companies focus on pricing strategies for launching their product, but never worry about long-term pricing. If you can't differentiate, pricing pressures will be higher. So you want to think about this. You can think about how you're going to price your product at the beginning when you launch it, but where does it go from there? Does it go down? Does it stay the same? Raising it will probably be difficult. So you want to think of those things. If you are going to raise your prices, you're probably going to need to differentiate more or add some additional value, or the customers are going to be unhappy. All right, so some general pricing strategies. Cost plus pricing. So this is the most basic type. You're going to consider your production cost. You're going to include cost of goods sold, fixed costs for current volume, and then add your desired profit margin. So we'll go with variable cost per unit to fixed cost per unit. That's going to equal your total cost per unit. And then to calculate this margin, you'll take this total cost per unit from up here and then just multiply it by 1 plus your desired margin. All right, so say we've got a product that the variable production cost is 50 cents. Our average fixed costs are $1.50 per unit. If we want a 30% margin, you just multiply it by 1.3 and you get to $2.60. That make sense? All right, so this is pretty basic pricing. You're just tacking on a margin. It's an okay strategy, but you need to consider all your costs. So some examples: your time spent billing, processing orders, servicing a product or customer, quoting, sales expenses, distribution expenses. You don't have all these costs figured out and factored into your total cost per unit, then they're all eating into your profit margin. And so in order for this strategy to really work, you need to know your costs really, really well. And a lot of times that's difficult in the startup. It's generally better to price based on value and build in a significant margin to fully account for costs. So that's what we recommend for startups is this value-based pricing. And this is where you price your product based on the value it provides. This can be disconnected from costs. It can be perceived value. It could be some innovation that you have. But in any case, focus on the value that the customer is getting. And that's going to give you more margin and make your business more profitable. You're going to try to capture the majority of what your customers are willing to pay. Generally, a full recapture of the value you provide is not compelling. You need to make it really clear that the benefits exceed the costs. And always remember, value can be perceived or estimated. All right, so in a business-to-business setting, businesses are only interested if the product saves money, saves time, makes money, reduces risk. Value must be concrete and justifiable. Now, some things to remember here: if you've got a product that can save a company money, your ability to save them money isn't tied to the cost of your product, right? And so that's where you're going to be able to expand that profit margin, because you get a pretty cost-effective solution, and then you're able to mark it up to price it towards whatever value it provides to the business. And the business doesn't care what it costs you to produce that solution. What they care about is their result, one of these things. So remember that those aren't necessarily linked, and you don't need to just do a small markup on your costs. Price it based on the value of your customer, particularly in these business-to-business settings. All right, so here's an example. VMware, they make virtualization software. And so everybody's seen these type of charts where they'll outline what their product does and then what the alternatives would be. And so what they did is they showed these are all the things that VM software offers. And this is what you can get from a competitor using MS Windows and what they would cost. And what they showed is you can't even get some of these features. And if you just acquire, half of the functionality that this one system provides, that would cost $7,000. So then when they show their product costs $5,000, that's pretty compelling, right? Because they show that, you get all these things, and if you're going to buy them somewhere else, they cost way more, and you get some additional value here. So they're kind of leading you into, this is a good deal, and they're justifying it with some concrete and specific features. All right, moving on to business to consumers, so selling directly to customers. Value can be more subjective. How is this possible here with these two watches? Those are the prices of them.
The quality between each other.
Don't they look the same?
Branding, the brand.
Brand, right? And there might be some quality there, but on the surface, these things look identical. Right? So you got a Rolex over here that sells for $8,900, and you got a Invitica watch that is almost a clone, basically, slightly different logo. And maybe the internal workings are a little different. But does it justify a 100-time markup? The Rolex is an extremely profitable product because they've been able to build a brand that prices in significant margin. It definitely doesn't cost them $8,500 to make that watch. There's no way, And so the reason this happens is that consumers are not necessarily looking for a return on their purchase like a business. Consumers can value, the status, the brand, the novelty, the fact that it's new, innovative, all these type of things. It's really subjective. It's in the eyes of the consumer. And so if you're able to demonstrate value to that consumer, you can charge pretty significant prices. All right, so when we're talking about value-based pricing, this is the ideal strategy for startups because profit is key to your survival. Profit can be reinvested to improve quality, expand, and money in a startup is expensive. If you're not getting your money from profits, then you're going to have to raise money, and as a startup, that's expensive. More profits, less financing. If you do need to find financing, you get more attractive terms, the more profit that you have. All right. Any questions on value-based pricing? Anybody want to argue for cost-plus pricing is a better strategy?
I just think it's like really important that you know your customers really well with value-based pricing, because
Yeah.
like for the B2B example there where you're like showing the the Microsoft product versus the other product, and you can illustrate that all day long, but if your customers don't care about the extra
Yeah.
the value you're claiming about those things that like they don't necessarily want, then it really doesn't matter. And like sometimes you see that whenever you're looking at a product and you're like, oh look, it's got all these extra features, and you kind of look at it and be like, actually I don't think I'd use one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. More features doesn't always mean more value. Some ways it may make the product less usable. And so you do really need to know your customers' value-based pricing. Once you do know your customers, then you can add features that add a lot of value for them, but maybe don't cost you that much money. And that's where you start to get higher margins for your product. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, some more strategies. Skimming. This is basically charging super high prices at first to launch and recoup development expenses. So when you think of like DVDs or Blu-rays when they first come out, super expensive, then gradually the price comes down. Yeah, basically what's happening here is you're just riding a demand curve down. So from economics, I'm sure you guys remember, on a demand curve you've got price on the y-axis, demand on the x-axis, and demand is always downward sloping. And what demand means is customers that are willing and able to pay for your product. The reason it's downward sloping is because at lower prices, more consumers are willing and able to pay for your product. But what it also shows is at the top, that there's some customers that want your product so bad they're willing to pay a ton for it. And so with skimming, what you do is you sell to those customers that have to have a new Blu-ray, regardless of the cost first. And you fulfill that demand, then you lower the price a little bit and you get the next slice of customers that want it slightly less than the first ones. And you kind of ride this demand curve down. It allows you to maximize profits. If you just price it, the equilibrium price that you'd end up at, you'd lose out on all those extra profits from the first customers. Tesla is a good example of this, where they didn't start with a low price product, they started with a really high price product, and they fulfilled some of that demand, and that allowed them to finance their other products after that. And now they're coming out with lower priced cars. But for them, it wasn't about selling millions and millions of cars at first. It was about selling some, getting the product right, and generating a lot of profit. And so since they're only serving a niche of that market, they could price their product really high. Another way to look at this is, as you ride through this technology adoption life cycle, you've got your early market, people that just love new products. And then you've also got your early majority, and then as you get a mainstream, price usually falls. And so what you're going to do is you start with a high price, and as the technology matures, it gets in these later markets. Price gradually goes down. All right. Does that make sense to everybody? Skimming? Yeah, so it's something you want to think about at first. If you can demand a really high price, even if you don't sell a lot, they can add a lot to your profit margin.
Apple doesn't seem to go down, does it? It just stays high.
That's true, yeah. I mean, they obviously need to keep coming up with new products, and they kind of restart this each time. But I mean, they do kind of go through it where their previous models, those will go down in price,
Yeah.
and that's to fulfill these different sectors of demand.
Yeah, the better you can nail your beachhead market, the better this technique will be. If you can really hit those visionaries early on, but if you're just like, I think this is my beachhead, and it turns out that like they don't really care about that feature that you
Yeah.
think you're talking about, that's going to be so significant to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really good point. Thinking about that beachhead is one that really like has to have your product. If you're trying to find that beachhead that's really going to pay way more than anybody else for your particular product. That's pretty important. Yeah, so that's a good point. All right, another one, price anchoring. For new products, establishing context can be very important, especially if it's an innovative product. People may not be used to paying for it. I mean, still some people just like, they don't get it about paying for digital goods. Like, why am I going to pay for digital music or an app on a phone? But then people that have kind of grown up in that context, and they're like, yeah, sure, this makes sense to buy some digital goods. They've got that context. And so whatever your product is, you need to find some way to kind of anchor it to something that's like okay, this is a fair price for whatever you're going to ask for. And so here's some studies of some different drinks and then the number that people chose. Any observations here? Why would these percentages shake out this way?
The percentages are the numbers of people that chose that option, right?
So they're presented with these two options: a dollar, drink for $1.80 and a drink for $2.50.
Because it's on draft.
Well, these are the same ones, right?
Yeah.
So why would these different choices change based on just what's around something?
Perceived amount gain.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the best bang for your buck, like the best value you could get.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you're inferring that based on the other options. So that's the whole point of pricing. Think about what information are people using to infer this is a fair deal. Are they seeing your product as something that's overpriced relative to everything else? Or is it, underpriced or whatever? And in some cases you can see once there's three options, people tend to choose the middle option. So that's a good lesson there. And you see sometimes people framing in their product with three options, a low-priced option, a higher-priced option, and a middle one that maybe is the one that they want you to choose. So you want to think about these type of things. Is how is your customer going to assess which one to choose?
Do you think companies would create other products that lead to their best-selling product?
They have.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be like customers into falling into that product to buy.
Yeah, there's actually, I think the first one was a bread machine. There was a new product at the time, one of those machines where you just put like the dough and water in and just turn it on, it makes bread. It was a new product. They didn't really have any anchor for it. So what the company did is they created a lower priced one and a higher priced one. And they really wanted to sell the main one. And that's exactly what they did. They launched all three products under different brand names. And that gave the anchor to the middle one that they wanted to sell. So that happens a lot where like Procter & Gamble has a lot of different product brands that they manage. Some are higher end, some are lower end. But they'll use those to then anchor maybe the products that they want you to buy.
Why did Apple come out with the 10s when they were still barely out with the 8s?
On the iPhones?
Did they put the 8s out to get people to buy the 10s because the 10s seem better?
I think one of the things that they're always going for is how quickly can they get you to rebuy the new device. So, I mean, if they say they launch an 8, demand's already saturated with that, then you launch a 10 that's like, supposedly a
But they
revolutionary model.
the timing wasn't that far apart from each other. Usually they have like at least a year and a half to 2 years
But
between.
I think another part of that too is like their market as a whole is getting saturated. So you don't have as many new buyers of iPhone versus like people that are converting from either a traditional non-smartphone or a BlackBerry or Android users that are converting. That markets are more settled now. So I think that now in order to keep demand up, everyone already has an iPhone, whether it's the 4 or the 10, they've got an iPhone. So to be able to introduce more demand, they have to create something else.
Maybe they could get some people who just bought an 8 to switch to the X just because it's the newest one. And so if they're able to shorten those cycles, you get people rebuying more quickly. I'm not sure. How did their sales work out? Was it effective for them?
I have no idea.
They're stopping
I thought you'd know.
production for the iPhone 10 early.
They what?
They're stopping production for the iPhone 10 early.
Oh, really?
I don't know the specific reasons why,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're stopping it early compared to how they do with all their other phones.
So maybe it wasn't a good choice. Maybe that was a mistake.
Honestly, their timing might have been really bad,
Yeah.
or not the best.
I can't even imagine them doing a bad.
I
Like
can't.
it
It's
wasn't
Apple.
a calculated thing.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be very thought out. That wasn't just a fluke of some sort on Apple's part. They don't. There's too many people to check and balance on flukes.
But they may have realized maybe a fault in the 8 that they wanted a remedy right away by putting the next best product out before it became like bad, brand recognition or something. I mean, there are a ton of factors that could have led to that.
I think it more had to do with this. That they were trying to get people to get the 10s. So they threw the 8s out to try to get you to, I don't know.
Yeah, because they do always anchor their models as like, the 4, 5, and 6. That's, sliding price scales and things like that.
That or they're just adding another option, because if you think most phone companies or brands have multiple lines, and this is maybe Apple's first approach to adding an additional line or a phone option. And
Yeah.
it wasn't as good because they've always stuck to just this. This is what it is. This is the update. That's it. It's the only option. Because that's color, but
Any other thoughts on why Apple chose to do things that way?
Honestly, I see Apple as a trendsetter,
Yeah.
considering they're at the top of the market right now. I wanted to say they're starting to come out with a more professional, higher end phone that would niche to like the top market even more. I'd say they were trying to start, you know how like we already have the high end iPhones, they probably wanted to start a new market where it was even like exclusive. So that's maybe what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the first $1,000 phone. I think was
Yeah.
significant too. Yeah, I think that in itself, like that price anchor is important. Like you're not buying this phone because it's cheapest for sure, or because it's a good deal. All right. Some other examples. Everybody's seen these progressive ads where they'll compare a lot of different providers and obviously show Progressive's the cheapest. You see some things like this. This is another example of price anchoring, where you've got, you know, premium over here, the basic on the right, and then the plus is, you know, they even say it's our most popular plan, and they obviously highlight it because that's the one that they want you to buy. And that goes back to these things where people tend to avoid extremes, and that most of your buyers are in this category where these would be extreme users, and those basic users, they're really just trying to get them to move up to plus eventually.
I think it's interesting on that one that they started with the most like expensive first, and then worked it back to the very
Yeah.
basic version.
That was actually the first time I noticed that. Usually they read left to right in terms of like
Yeah.
price going up, but maybe there's something about making that go backwards.
This actually follows like the lowering demand curve and the distribution bell that we're so used to, where the early innovators would be like the super premium, and the basic would be the laggers, and the plus would just be, you know, the market.
Yeah. And I guess that's the way you read it too. You're like, oh my God, $99 a month. Oh wait, $49. That sounds better. $24? That's a great deal, right? Rather than, you know, gradually increasing it. So this can be valuable for existing products and services. Again, the customers tend to avoid extremes. So when you've got a website or something like that, you can basically control how prices are anchored. Another lesson here, this is totally value-based pricing. Okay, the cost for them to go from 6 users to 15 users to 40 users is pennies. You know, this is a computer business. Storage, you know, I mean, 10 gigabytes to 30 gigabytes, it's so cheap for them to actually deliver that, but they're going to mark it up because it's valuable to the customer. So it's a good example of value-based pricing where their profit margins on these premium customers very significant compared to the basic, because the cost structure on all of this is probably pretty similar. Feature-based pricing. So this is where you kind of line up a lot of these different features and then think about how much each of those things is worth. So this is a list of electronic cars. It's from a couple of years ago. But if you look at the price that they're selling for, their electric range, their total range, their equivalent miles per gallon, top speed, hours to charge, whether it's 120 volt or 240 volt. Any observations there? You guys can see that. Why the actual price breaks down this way based on what the features are. Maybe you can tell which ones are the valuable features.
Total range.
Total range. Yeah, so you kind of look at this as Tesla's able to command much higher prices because they've got a big jump in total range. You don't get the same thing for the Prius plug-in because it's not a full electric car. But for a full electric car, basically doubled range over all the other ones, or tripled. That's really significant. That adds a lot to the retail price. Also, top speed on these ones, these are a lot faster. And then hours to charge on this is pretty similar. But so basically the message is some features carry more value than others. Brand always plays a role in pricing power. But you want to think about what are the important features to your customer. So going back to those things that really add value, what are they? And if you're able to increase range or something like that, how much extra could you charge?
And there's more than just range there, right? There's the brand equity, right? In
Yeah.
terms of Tesla and that whole backstory.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you can't measure it on these charts, but like the cool factor or design and stuff like that. Teslas obviously look a lot different than like the Nissan Leaf or the Mitsubishi Mini.
Chevy Bolt.
So you want to consider the prices competitors are offering for different features, and then kind of price similar so it makes sense why yours is more. Being cheapest is not always the best strategy. As you can see, Mitsubishi's got a much lower price point than some of these other ones. All right. Here's another example of pricing based on features in a way that's completely disconnected from value. We were just talking about this, the way iPhone sells their phones. And you've got significant jumps in pricing based on storage, right? Storage is cheap, we all know that. So $100 to go from 16 gigabytes to 32, and then look, for $100 you get another 32 gigabytes after that. I mean, it probably costs $2 or $3 for them to add that additional storage on the phone, but it adds value to the customer, function to the phone, and so they're able to command those higher prices. What's also interesting is the way they set up these prices in a way that it makes sense to customers, and they're willing to make these choices, even though the cost to Apple is not even a factor.
They also close out their systems with a lot of proprietary technology that doesn't allow you to upgrade too, so you sort of have to make that decision early on. You know you're going to run out of storage and you really can't add any after the fact.
Yeah, and customers generally don't like those, but it does allow them to extract more revenue from their customers. All right, some more examples. Some different websites of how they frame their pricing. They're trying to sell the specific features that matter to customers, and then maybe highlighting like these ones are where they want you to go. So there's a lot of visual cues of which one do they want you to actually choose. Again, pricing in the middle, avoid extremes. All right. Any questions on pricing strategies before we move on? Distribution channels? Any other strategies you guys have heard of that we should talk about? Think of any, let me know. I'll add it to the presentation. For distribution channels and pricing, this is something you always want to think about, because depending on how you are going to get your product to market, depends a lot about what you can actually charge for your product. And it's not the same thing as the end retail price. So if you're going direct sales, your price is basically what it sells for. All right. So, but that's only if you're selling directly to customers. In some cases, you may be having a reseller, and they're going to take their cut. So you need to factor that into your cost structure, because if you don't, it's just going to eat into your profit margin. If you need to go through a distributor, it gets shrunk down even more, and you just got to make sure that there's enough room in here for all these expenses. To some extent, if you go through a distributor or a reseller, maybe some of your selling expenses might go down because you're not having to handle that side of it. But you need to consider those type of things. Typically, a retailer is going to want to keystone a product, which means they're going to double the price. So if they're going to sell it for $20, they're going to buy it from you for 10. So you need to make sure that you're able to produce that product in a way that you can be profitable selling it for $10. And if not, you need to think about how can you raise the end selling price in order to make it profitable for you. All right, now imagine you're licensing your technology, or you're going to be original equipment manufacturer, something that's going to go in a larger product. Then you're condensed even more. You're looking at what's the total price that that end product is going to sell for, and you're one piece of that cost structure in there. So you really need to calculate this out and make sure that it's going to be effective for you. Now, in this scenario, your product becomes your customer's cost of goods. Right, so you need to fit within that constraint. Some other considerations: elasticity of demand. So we've got a basic demand curve, price and quantity, and catch a downward sloping demand. That's typically the way it's drawn. There are some other situations where it's drawn like this. What does that mean? You got a demand curve that's steeper like that.
regardless of price, and demand stays relatively the same.
Exactly. So price can go up this much, but demand only changes that much. So usually that's going to be products like gas, that you just have to buy, or cigarettes. There's at some point people may quit cigarettes if the price goes high enough, but for the most part people just pay whatever it is. And so there's some inelastic products. I mean, maybe Apple to some extent, people are just going to pay whatever they charge. Rolex is probably pretty inelastic for the customers that buy that, where an increase in price is not going to dissuade.
But the demand is constant, so.
Exactly. So that would be an example of something that's inelastic. So you've got the ability to raise prices and not lose out on demand. The inverse of that is something that's very elastic. This is where small changes in price, or that much, leads to big changes in demand. And so that might be, if you think about fresh produce or something like that, and you got a bunch of different fruits. If one, goes out of season and it's twice as expensive, demand for that's probably going to fall off dramatically. They're going to go buy whatever's in season that's lower priced. And so this is markets that have little differentiation. There's a lot of comparable products. And so if there's a change in price, you just switch into something else.
So say since avocados are out of season, would you raise prices or lower prices to increase demand on avocados?
Well, don't think about it as changing demand, as like changing quantity demanded. So this is your indication of, depending on what prices are, this is how much would be demanded.
Yeah.
So if it's out of season, they're more expensive to produce. There's less of them. So you're going to price them higher because the only people buying them are going to be the ones that really, really want them.
Yeah, say restaurants who need them for stuff like that, like guacamole or something.
Yeah. So
Okay.
once they're scarcer, then they would charge a higher price. So I guess there's some pieces of that market that may be inelastic, like they just gotta have avocados. But and maybe avocados are more unique fruit or vegetable.
I don't
It's
know.
It's a fruit.
Is it? Oh, it has a
Fruit is
seed.
another
Yeah,
one.
it is a fruit.
Yeah. So some people just have to have the guacamole. And so I guess that's an example. There's some places where avocados can be produced year round.
Yeah.
And so that they demand higher prices in the off season because there's less competition. So, but to some extent, they're all subject to some elasticity of demand. As those prices change, quantity demand is going to change. So you just need to know what that looks like for your product. Is there ability to raise prices? So going back to that initial example, you got this $1,000 service. Could you keep one of your 5 current customers and sell for $2,000? You'd make the same amount of money, but that calculation's all based on the elasticity of the demand. So you want to know what this is because it informs how much you could change your prices, hopefully raise them, and not lose that many customers. That table that I showed at first only works assuming constant cost and constant demand. If demand falls off, then your profits will not go up by quite as much. All right. Another thing to consider, blue ocean strategy. So this is basically using feature-based pricing as a differentiation strategy. The way it works is you slice up all these things that are parts of your value offering. So the example here is for Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus and then Cirque du Soleil. And so the things they offered, they had, moderate price, they had a star performer, they had animals, aisle concessions, fun, humor, kind of a unique venue, but they didn't really have a theme or anything like that. So this was their offering, that's what it looks like. And so what Cirque du Soleil did was they took out a lot of these things that they didn't think, when they looked at their customers weren't that excited about. So, you maybe had star performers in the circus, it's a traveling circus, people go to the circus once every couple of years. The star really didn't do it for them. So that what they were paying the star performer wasn't translating the value for the customer. So Cirque du Soleil just got rid of it. They got rid of the animals because that actually turns some people away, and it's really expensive to contain elephants and things like that. Aisle concessions weren't something that brought a lot of people in. Just got rid of those. They got rid of the multiple show arenas because traveling was expensive. And they added a lot of these other things. Unique venue, they added themes to it, refined watching environment, multiple productions. They added some artistic music and dance. And so they did this more as a Vegas show, where it had some of the elements of the circus that drew people in, but they added these other things, then they got rid of the expensive parts. And so it was a much more profitable show. It also had a unique position in the market because it's not really your traditional Vegas show, but it's also not a circus, but it kind of draws on those things. So that's the idea behind Blue Ocean strategy. You look at what other competitors are doing, either add to it, take away from it, and create some new offering that's going to be more profitable and also unique. Some other examples for Southwest Airlines. When they started, they were kind of trying to fit between average airlines and then driving the car. So it was regional transportation. So what they did was they stripped away all those things that added costs to the average airlines, like meals, lounges, seating class choices, lots of hub connectivity. They actually added that to make it easier to get around. Friendly service, they added a lot to that because that didn't cost a lot of money, but it meant stuff to the customer. And then speed was really what they optimized for. And so you look at this change in the value map compared to the average airlines. They're able to find a niche where they didn't have a direct competitor for the particular value offering that they had. So this is a pretty powerful differentiation strategy, and it's all based on understanding what the customer wants and what they don't want, and then looking at other offerings and basically stripping away the parts that are not adding value or are costing too much to deliver relative to the value that they provide to the customer. Any questions on that?
So they technically opened up the market, like larger, so more consumers have affordable prices.
Yeah, and that's what's unique about Blue Ocean strategy. It's not trying to take customers from existing competitors. It's basically bring new customers into the market because you got
More to offer for those.
yeah, and it targets a niche that's not being served well by the existing competitors. Another one for wines. I won't go through this. You guys get it. All right, so some takeaways. It's easier to lower prices than to raise prices. You want to price your product higher than you think and see how customers respond. Early adopters will pay more for innovative products. And then you want to price based on value rather than cost, and distribution channels can have major impacts on your pricing. All right, any questions on pricing strategies? All right, so I got a question for you. What strategies have you or should you use pricing your products or services? Anybody got any experience with any of these strategies or different strategies that they've used before? All right, which one did you want? Which strategy resonated the most? Which one would you want to try?
Probably value based.
Yeah.
I'd want to add as much value to a product or service that I'm providing the customer, so they're always willing to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely right. Yeah, and based on all the ones we looked at, value-based pricing is really the way to go. So you should really be thinking in that mindset when you're pricing your products. Even if it means you don't get as many customers as you could at a lower price, focus on the ones that really, really want your product and are willing to pay for it. That's what's going to build a sustainable, profitable business that can grow and can scale. Rather than one that kind of scrapes
Like
by.
Apple, because they just initially focused on MP3, and then they perfected that and was able to branch off. That's it.
Yeah, but then they go for everything all
All
at
at once.
once. Yeah.
Yeah, they just had I would say they were just trying to take the music industry, like portable music.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes back to that point about understanding how your prices are going to evolve over time.
Yeah.
Where's your product plan going to go? Definitely. All right. Well, next week, we've got a talk on idea generation. So come check that out. As always, you can subscribe to our events on Facebook/Studio G NMSU. We also stream live, so you can watch this again, or you can watch past networking hours, or watch them live in the future if you don't want to come in and enjoy the pizza. So thanks for coming. We'll see you next week.